BBOR Black Box Online Radio, coming to you from West Virginia. BlackBoxNid88 on Instagram for the bonus podcast. And welcome to BBOR, the home of true crime talk radio and your premier destination for unsolved mysteries, criminal psychology, and exploring the dark side of cyberspace. My name is Ned DeHaan, and I am your host, as well as the creator of AstroPsych 400 here on YouTube, and regular contributor to the Zodiac Killer channel. And a great way to support these shows is just by listening to some more content. But you can also go over to Amazon.com and have a look at the book Killer on a White Horse, written by me, Ned DeHaan. It is a novel, murder mystery, inspired by the Zodiac Manson connection, but it is indeed fictional. However, who doesn't love a good mystery? And there is always the TeeSpring page. Feel free to check out some of the merchandise. And remember, being weird is not a crime. Let the show begin. This episode of Black Box Online Radio is brought to you by Rep Sports and Raze Energy. Are you a fan of energy drinks, protein shakes, and health foods? Well, I sure am. I use the stuff almost every single day. They sell Raze Energy products at my local gym, but you can have them shipped to your home. Use the coupon code NED075, that's NED075, for discounts applied at the checkout. The link is in the description box. Okay, hello everybody. Today is Friday. Another Anything Goes Friday. Welcome to the show. So last week on the channel, I was talking about Jack the Ripper and the From Hell letter, and that just got me curious about reading more on the Jack the Ripper communications, and today I will be discussing the Saucy Jacky Postcard. Now, I'm fully aware, and it's important to state that the From Hell letter came after the Saucy Jacky Postcard, which was sent in by the Ripper allegedly, but almost think of this as working backwards in a series of future Jack the Ripper discussions. But before I truly begin, I would like to make the announcement that this channel now has a page on BuyMeACoffee.com, and if you would like to support the show, you can make a contribution. And this is something that is a little bit new for me here on Black Box Online Radio, because I never bothered with any of this stuff for years. But I was talking about this on the Instagram journal once. It is mostly because of the YouTube censors. This channel is now monetized, but almost every other video gets demonetized in the true crime world. Anything that's dealing with serial killers, particularly cases that are gory or talking about blood, so to speak, like the way that Jack the Ripper would be. But it's just quite shocking. There doesn't seem to be any type of metric or rhyme or reason to why some videos about the Zodiac Killer get monetized and some get demonetized. Some about Jack the Ripper monetized, some demonetized. There really doesn't seem like there is any type of fairness going on. So if you would like to support this channel, again, there is a link in the description box for BuyMeACoffee.com. My name is BlackBoxNid88 over there. That's the same name as my Instagram handle, and you can follow the show on Instagram, as well as contacting with me on Facebook. My personal Facebook is in the description box, and BlackBoxOnlineRadio at AOL.com. Lots of things are in the description box. I invite you to have a look. But as for today's subject, we are going back to 1888 once again, specifically October 1st of that year, when the Saucy Jacky Postcard was mailed. Now, this is one that talks about Jack the Ripper's double event, which saw the murders of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes. The Jack the Ripper has 5 canonical victims, much like the Zodiac Killer and some other serial killers out there, and they are Polly Nichols, Annie Chapman, Liz Stride, Catherine Eddowes, and Mary Kelly. The double event, as previously stated, was when Liz Stride had her throat slit, and then it's possible that 15 minutes after that, the Ripper was already beginning the plan to murder Catherine Eddowes. So what really happened is still somewhat of a mystery, and even after more than 100 years, and as soon as going to be 150 years, this is still an unsolved case. And right now I would like to read the text of the Saucy Jacky Postcard. I was not codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jacky's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number one squealed a bit, couldn't finish straight off. Had not time to get ears off for police. Thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again. Jack the Ripper. This is an important communication because, unlike the From Hell letter, which I was discussing recently, this is tied to the Frederick Best confession. In 1931, a journalist of that name admitted that he fabricated two of the Jack the Ripper communications, the Dear Boss letter, which was first, and the Saucy Jacky postcard. But what actually happened? Because the skeptics of the Ripper hoax theory just say, well, no, he's not telling the truth. He is just somebody else who made up a story. More than 150 people confessed to being Jack the Ripper. This is just another example of it, albeit 43 years later, but it's still the same story. Someone is not being truthful. And as I said, this is still an unsolved case. Absolutely not everyone accepts that the Frederick Best confession is authentic. The Ripper hoax theory is the idea that somebody was writing letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit. There was no real Jack the Ripper. There was no single serial killer that terrorized London in 1888. And then there are multiple killers theories where people think that more than one person was involved with the Jack the Ripper murders. Then there is the idea that the British Crown was behind it, or that there is some type of doctor who is working for the royals that was responsible for a variety of motivations that I won't get into in this episode. But to examine two different theories, I mean, I would say that I'm about 51% versus 49% in favor of the hoax theory. 51% meaning that this was all a hoax orchestrated by the newspapers, because the explanation that has been provided by Frederick Best was that it was simply done to sell newspapers. He worked for the publication called The Star, and he just wanted to save the newspaper more or less to get some type of mass hysteria and fascination going on in the general public. Now, I said 51% to 49%. So let's examine the 49%. What evidence is there that there was a single Jack the Ripper? And I absolutely have to give credit to Shaper Art, who wrote out an excellent comment talking about how his theory is that there was perhaps indeed a hoaxer, but that doesn't mean that there wasn't a Ripper. I mean, even excluding the murder of Liz Stride, somebody still could have been a serial killer, and even if this journalist learned about it from, well, just that, it's his job to follow the news and the events, and wrote letters taking credit for murders that he didn't commit, there still could have been a serial killer. The serial killer just wasn't some type of braggadocio who is trying to taunt the police and the public with his letters. So there are lots of theories out there, and you can share your theory in the comments section down below. What do you think happened with Jack the Ripper and the Whitechapel murders? Let's look at the evidence in favor of, though, a single perpetrator committing the 5 murders that I stated. The first is that the Ripper is taking credit for it, and the second is explanations have been provided. For example, let's go right here to the Saucy Jacky postcard. The Ripper is telling us exactly what happened and why he did what he did. He says that he attacked one woman and that she squealed a bit, which I can only gather means something more like screaming or shouting rather than an actual squeal. So he got spooked, he got scared, he thought that he was going to draw attention to himself, so he slashed her throat and then got away as soon as he was physically possible and able to do so without being seen. Then he went after another woman. And as I said, the murder, the double event concerns the murders of Liz Stride and Catherine Eddowes. And one thing that had bothered me in the past about the murder of Liz Stride was the timeline. There's this man that is seen walking with her for an extended period of time, and I mean very, very long, but If Jack the Ripper could have found Catherine Eddowes in 15 minutes after murdering Liz Stride, that suggested that he should have had familiarity with the area and how to quote-unquote meet a lady, being polite. So why did he have to spend all that time with someone who was being difficult or slowing him down? If he could have found a victim so easily, wouldn't he have just said, "Oh, well, F this, I'm going to go find a victim," more easily? But then again, that there's no way to judge that. This could just be fortune, chance. This could just be bad luck and bad fortune on the part of Catherine Eddowes. No matter what, the murderer didn't know that Catherine Eddowes would be at that location at that exact time. It was just a chance encounter on the part of the Ripper. So that's what could have happened. He murders Liz Stride, and yes, indeed, 15 minutes later, a quarter of an hour later, he met the next victim. And I do think that the Saucy Jacky postcard is also very telling. That shows that the Ripper is mostly not about killing people. The Ripper is mostly about mutilations. And that's the message that he wants to send to the media as well as the general public. And not only is he mutilating the victims, he cuts out the kidney of Catherine Eddowes, cuts it in half, maybe eats it, maybe doesn't, but then he sends in the From Hell letter on October 15th of 1888 saying that he has half a kidney that he has preserved in some type of solution mailed to George Lusk, who is the chairman of the Whitechapel Vigilance Committee, and then says that he ate the other half, and he's trying to prove that he committed that crime. Now, even though that letter is not signed from Jack the Ripper, even though that letter has different handwriting, obviously that's not the person's natural handwriting. That is simply somebody who is trying to disguise his handwriting or be a little bit creepy. But no matter what, if you followed any of the episodes that I've done on Zodiac Mondays, you'll know that there's a theory about how serial killers can grow in confidence when they are taunting people. And could this be that someone was getting off on the hysteria that he created, so he decided to do something creepier, escalating the deviant behavior? Okay, not only is he murdering and mutilating women, now he wants to make the handwriting look creepier, he wants to mail in some type of gruesome, I repeat, gruesome trophy. Sickening, actually. But all of that suggests that there is a single killer. And I also want to be very clear, that is not playing devil's advocate on my part. Those are genuinely the reasons why I think there could be a single killer, but I can't ignore that there was a confession made by Frederick Best. There was an explanation provided. There was this very noticeable difference in handwriting despite everything I said. Like I said, 51% versus 49%. But I wanted to share with you guys what I was genuinely thinking. And you can weigh in the comment section down below. What do you think? Do you think that the hoax theory is more plausible? Or do you think that the single killer or maybe some group murder theory is more plausible as well? Now, let's look at the challenges to any type of thing, all sorts going in all directions. And there is a rather famous academic article that has been put out there called An Authorship Analysis of the Jack the Ripper Letters by Andrea Nini. And if you put her name into Google, you'll find that she is a forensic linguist who looked at some of the similarities among the Jack the Ripper letters, including the Saucy Jacky Postcard. The abstract of her article says, "The Whitechapel murders that terrorized London in 1888 are still remembered to this day, thanks to the legend of its unapprehended perpetrator, Jack the Ripper. In addition to the gruesomeness of the murders, the name and the persona of the killer have been popularized by the over 200 letters signed as Jack the Ripper that have been received following the murders. The most supported theory on the authorship of the letters is that some of the earliest texts were written by journalists to sell newspapers, and that the same person is responsible for writing the two most iconic early letters. The present article reports on an authorship clustering verification analysis of the Jack the Ripper letters." And I was actually really glad to find that this is at academic.oup.com, and normally you get the abstract of an article, but this actually gives you the entire article, including some of these forensic linguistic comments. And some of this was a little bit over my head. There's some types of linguistic equations that are used. But here is something that I could genuinely discuss. There is the table syntactic analysis of the concordances for the 2 grams in common between the Dear Boss letter that comes before and the Saucy Jacky Postcard. Both of the letters use the words a bit, both of them use gave, both of them say I got. And when I was first reading through this list, I was like, are you kidding me? That's your forensic analysis? Give, gave, got. I mean, these are just some super common words of the English language. But wait, there's more. Both of them use till. Both of them use the word time to, or the phrase rather, time to. Then they say work, to work. Both of them use letter. Both of them say back, and both of them say till I. And after all of these combinations have been put together, there are 8 different linguistic clusters that have been found. And once I got to the end of the list, I was thinking the Saucy Jacky Postcard is a very, very short piece of text. And believe it or not, I began to think, I think the forensic linguist is onto something, that these were indeed written by the same person. Now, as I said, there could have just been a ripper out there who wrote them just like it's presented to be, made to look like it. But this is the only text on the Saucy Jacky Postcard. I was not codding dear old boss when I gave you the tip. You'll hear about Saucy Jacky's work tomorrow. Double event this time. Number 1 squealed a bit, couldn't finish straight off, had not time to get ears off. You see the words like get used very frequently. Had not time to get ears off. For police, thanks for keeping last letter back till I got to work again, Jack the Ripper. That is a very small piece of text, and the fact that there are these 8 linguistic combinations, I think it's somewhat of a convincing observation that the Saucy Jacky Postcard and the Dear Boss letter could have been written by the same person. Now, the original Saucy Jacky Postcard does not exist in the police archives anymore, nor does the From Hell letter, nor does the half kidney that was mailed in, which, as I understand, which is in some type of box that wasn't even made out of wood, but it was. The kidney is gone, the From Hell letter is gone, the Saucy Jacky Postcard is gone. The original Dear Boss letter was returned to the police archives in 1888, although I did find one source that said that happened in 1887, but no matter what, it was just before the 100th anniversary of the Whitechapel murders. And at that point, they could not extract any DNA from it. So if they just had some way of getting Frederick Best's DNA, or some way, somehow, gaining some type of forensic evidence that could connect him to this, that would be kind of an open and shut thing. But remember, that would just mean that he wrote one of the letters, the Dear Boss letter, and then that wouldn't mean necessarily that the entirety of the Ripper crimes were a hoax. Now, I would like to go to an article from Smithsonian Magazine that is talking about the Ripper communications, that it says that there are letters signed by Jack the Ripper, including 2 of the earliest and most important writings. One of those is the Dear Boss letter, where the murderer promises to clip off the ears of the next victim. In fact, the next victim did have her earlobe severed. The other is a blood-stained postcard which predicts a double murder and refers to the killer in the third person as Saucy Jacky. By predicts, I think they mean that the Saucy Jacky Postcard is taking credit for the murder, and predicts, like, the prediction is that they will hear about it, meaning that the crime has already taken place, but they shouldn't have learned about it yet. Another way this person is trying to authenticate himself. And this features some comments from Andrea Nini as well. It says, even though the Dear Boss letter was not in the public domain when the Saucy Jacky Postcard was received, they present a linguistic similarity in terms of combination of words that is much higher than one would expect if they were completely unrelated. The combination of words in common is between the 2 letters is so distinctive so that one would not expect them to be shared by chance alone. If the letters were a hoax, and that ends the quotation, mind you, this is the author of the article. If the letters were a hoax and no murderer actually contacted the authorities and dubbed himself Jack the Ripper, it means that after 130 years of research and investigation, we still know very little about the murders and whether the 5 supposed Jack the Ripper victims of the 11 murders committed in London's East End, collectively known as the Whitechapel murders, are linked. Cold case though it may be, this doesn't mean that people still aren't trying to crack the mystery. 25 years ago, researchers discovered a diary kept by Liverpool cotton merchant James Maybrick, in which he confesses to killing 5 women in London's East End and another in Manchester. He signs the diary Jack the Ripper. While the diary has long been considered a suspected forgery, and one man even confessed to creating it last year, ripperologists claim that they have evidence that the diary was found under the floorboards of Maybrick's home, which would seem to authenticate it. But do you see how this is going? Like, do you see why people doubt the Frederick Best confession? Everybody has some type of made-up story. Everybody is saying that these conflicting confessions are a forgery. You even have someone's diary where he confesses to 5 murders and says he's Jack the Ripper. Nope, that's not real. It's a forgery. That's why people don't believe the Frederick Best confession. They just put it in the pile with all of these other false confessions. Almost a year ago, members of the team with Smithsonian Magazine uncovered Richard III's grave in Leicester and made an unsuccessful attempt to exhume the grave of Mary Kelly, widely believed to be Jack the Ripper's last victim. Oh, that thing about Richard III, was he the one who was buried under some parking lot or something like that? I heard about that on Jeopardy. I don't watch Jeopardy, but I saw, like, just by chance, a YouTube clip of Final Jeopardy or something like that. And I would also like to ask you guys the challenge question. Do you agree or disagree with my statement that the Ripper has established a consistent narrative? And as I said, he was providing the explanation about how Liz Stride was meant to be his intended victim to not only murder her, but mutilate her. However, she either squealed, shouted, screamed, made some amount of noise, so then he just simply slit her throat and tried to leave as quickly as possible, didn't pose the body, didn't strangle her first, and then went looking for another victim, because as I said previously, Jack the Ripper wants to mutilate women, not only murder them. Or do you think that there is something inconsistent about the Ripper's timeline and the Ripper's activities that I have not stated? And calling on all you Ripperologists out there, I would love to hear from you. And there is a website, though, called Ripper.London that has an expose on the Saucy Jacky Postcard, and I would like to continue with this discussion. On October 1st of 1888, a postcard signed Jack the Ripper was sent to the Central News Agency in London. It has become known as the Saucy Jacky Postcard from the writer's use of that phrase. It also made reference to the previous letter, the Dear Boss letter, although its authenticity was not verified. It was published with hope that the handwriting might be identified. The Saucy Jacky Postcard was both postmarked and received on October 1st of 88, shortly after the murder of Elizabeth Stride and Catherine Eddowes. On September 30th, the Saucy Jacky writer referenced the double murders, calling it the double event, a term that continues to be in use in research. The writer appeared to have detailed knowledge of these murders. As for Elizabeth Stride, the author of Saucy Jacky wrote that number 1 squealed a bit, couldn't finish straight off. The body of Elizabeth Stride was found with her throat cut, but otherwise was unmutilated, suggesting that the murderer had been interrupted or scared off. Less than an hour later, the second victim, Catherine Eddowes, was murdered. In writing of the second victim, Saucy Jacky wrote, had not time to get ears off for the police. This is a reference to the fact that part of Catherine Eddowes' ear was cut off and found at the scene. He didn't have time to cut off her ear, but he had time to cut out her kidney? I don't know. That's kind of odd. At some point, the Saucy Jacky postcard was taken from the police files, as was the Dear Boss letter, but the Dear Boss letter was returned. The Saucy Jacky postcard is still missing. And this article actually concludes with a quotation from the Times on the 12th of November, 1888. Since the murders in Berners Street, St. George's, Mitre Square, Aldgate, on September 30th, no fewer than 1,400 letters relating to the tragedies have been received by the police, and although the greater portion of these gratuitous communications were found to be of trivial and even ridiculous character, still each one was thoroughly investigated, and as I said, from the Times, that appears to be an authentic quotation. One more time, big thank you to Ripper.London. And I should point out that Andrea Nini did say some other things in her paper about how the Saucy Jacky Postcard is almost apologizing for not being able to cut off the victim's ears and mail them in to the police. That's what the focus of the letter is, and I have no idea if that's actually Catherine Eddowes' kidney that was mailed in with the From Hell letter. That's kind of the conclusion of that episode if you didn't listen to it yet, but I hope you will at some point if you haven't heard my episode, Jack the Ripper, the From Hell letter, full analysis. But the long story short is that I have no idea if that's actually a female kidney or not, and that's the one point that I think should be agreed upon, that the authorities did not have the ability to determine if that kidney actually came from a woman, because the male and female kidneys are practically identical. Did the kidney actually come from Catherine Eddowes? I'm not sure. Did it come from someone who had Bright's disease, like the way Catherine Eddowes had Bright's disease? I'm not sure. Did the Ripper actually cut it in half and eat the other one? I'm not sure, but I don't believe they had sufficient abilities to determine that it was a female kidney. But you can hear more in that episode. But as for the Saucy Jacky Postcard, I thought it was a very interesting observation that the killer was apologizing for not being able to send in the victim's ears as promised, because when I first read this, I thought that it was not an apology, but rather a direct confession, and just somebody is trying to say, this is what I did, this is what happened, this is an explanation for why the crimes look the way they do, and someone's trying to do the whole thing of stating facts that only he and the police know. But a final note that I'll leave you with is that the Jack the Ripper mystery has the double event, which we've been discussing in this episode. The Zodiac Killer mystery really only seems to have one double event as well, and that is the murder of David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen, murders plural, because every other time a couple was targeted, at least one of the victims survived, whether it was Mike Michaud at Blue Rock Springs or Brian Hartnell at Lake Berryessa, and the final Zodiac victim was Paul Stein on October 11th of 1969, and he was a man who was driving a taxi, so he was by himself, but the Zodiac Killer murdered David Faraday and Betty Lou Jensen on December 20th of 1968, and it's just another commonality between Jack the Ripper and the Zodiac Killer. However, I think it's purely by chance. I don't know how the Zodiac could have known that Brian Hartnell would survive the Lake Berryessa stabbing and Mike Michaud would survive the Blue Rock Springs shooting, but I just wanted to throw that out there. So what do you think about any of the claims that I have made in this one? Do you believe that the Ripper's timeline, chronology, details are all consistent? So whether it's from the Saucy Jacky Postcard or the From Hell letter, do you think that there is anything that points toward the hoax theory, or do you think there's anything that is pointing toward a single killer theory? You can share anything you want in the comment section down below. Firstly, I would like to say, it's actually lastly, in conclusion, I would like to say a big rest in peace to all of the victims that have been discussed in this episode, and to you guys, thank you so much for listening, and you can feel free to visit any of the links in the description box, including BuyMeACoffee.com, the Raze energy drinks, the book Killer on a White Horse, Teespring page, lots of things in there, and I will see you over on Instagram for the bonus podcast. Until next time.